everybody. I have the coveted after-lunch spot. I actually quite like the after-lunch spot. One, you're docile. I just hope I don't put anyone to sleep. Before I get into it, by show of hands, how many people here would consider themselves a designer? Okay, not that many. Right, so I'll start from the beginning. I'm gonna probably wander around a bit, so. Okay, so first of all, what is service design? I don't have any slides, by the way, so if you want to tweet mean things at me, I'm Custom Deluxe on Twitter, and again, Louisa Heinrich. So, first off, what is service design? I think the easiest way to talk about what service design is to talk about services. So, let's start with one that we all know. Maybe not love, but everyone knows it. The Postal Service. What is it? Well, it's got lots of different touch points, for one thing. There's the guy that comes to your house and brings you things. There's the box on the street that you put stuff into. Little pieces of paper that you have to put on the things that you put in the box on the street. There's the people behind the counter who may or may not be helpful to you. The thing about the Postal Service is that neither I nor anyone I know was taught to use it. It just makes sense. We know how to get things from point A to point B. We don't think about it. We don't think about all the complexity that happens behind the scenes. The trucks, the buses, the logistics, the sorting machines, the magical elves, whatever it is that gets things from point A to point B, we don't have to think about it. It just works, except for when it doesn't. And that is the first hallmark of a great service, is it takes all that complexity, all of that stuff that you don't need to know about, and pushes it into the background. It doesn't make it go away, but it pushes it into the background so that normal people only have to deal with the things that make sense to them. In the digital world, the same applies, essentially. So one of my most often used services is Spotify. How many people here use Spotify? Most. Okay, good. So you know what it is. The great thing about Spotify is that, okay, to be fair, we could all get all of that music, legally or otherwise, from any number of different sources. What Spotify's done, though, is made that completely uncomplicated. You don't have to know whether or not GEMA has cleared the rights for you to listen to that piece of music or watch that video in Germany. You don't have to care what label put it out. You don't have to care when it was released. You don't even have to necessarily remember the name of the band. You can find whatever it is that you want to listen to. Even if you don't know what you want to listen to, you can see what your friends are listening to, what people you admire are listening to. It'll even sometimes recommend good things for you to listen to. Again, this is a service where they've taken all the complexity, all the rights management, all the negotiation, all the pricing, all of that stuff, and pushed it into the background. So all that you have to deal with, all that I have to deal with, is the stuff that makes us happy. Listening to music, skipping what we want, not having to pay for tracks that we don't like, etc. And it's successful. I mean, 25% conversion, something like 26 million subscribers, and 6 million of them are paying. That's not bad for a freemium model. So, services that do this work. And the third one that I wanted to talk about is Halo. Does anybody here know what Halo is? Does anybody here not know what Halo is? Okay, Halo is, for those of you who've never been to London, Halo is an app for hailing black cabs, which is unusual. You've always had apps for ordering mini cabs. You've got My Taxi here, which will order you a taxi. What Halo did that no one had done before is connect normal people with the taxis that are right around the corner waiting for you, but you don't know where they are. And anyone who's been stood in the middle of Soho at around midnight, desperate for a cab to get home, knows that pain. And this is the other thing that great services do. They solve a problem. They appeal to a really basic, observable, tangible human need. So those are the two things that make up a great service. And if you think about it, that means that service design is more than just the way it looks. It's more than just the interaction design. It's everything about it. It's what it does and why it does it, and also how it does it and how it works. So service design is just the most recent term for holistic, multidisciplinary, use the adjective of your choice, approach to problem solving. And that's where I'm going to leave my description of service design for now. Chris will take over with his forthwith. I want to talk a little bit about how to engage with this concept. So how do you do service design? How do you start along this journey? And the most important question is, what's the point? What's the point of what you're doing? You're building an app, you're making a service, you're building a website. Why? Who's it for? What are you trying to achieve? And there are a couple of different ways of going about answering that question. A lot of businesses, a lot of people will say, well, the competition's doing it. Interesting. The competition might be doing it, but one, it might not be the right thing for them either, and certainly might not be the right thing for you. And two, if you always follow the competition, you're not ever going to be able to get ahead. Who's to say that whatever they're doing is the thing that you should be doing? It's much better if you find a different way, if you find a route that's just yours, something that only you can do. That's the way to mark out territory for yourself, for your own business, for your own app. Another way of going about it is to think about the technology. And I'm pretty sure everybody in this room would qualify as a geek. I do as well, although I haven't written code in a long time, sorry. I love technology. I love new inventions. I love seeing the stuff that we come up with. But if you let technology lead you, and you make something based on the fact that you can, you might wind up with something that's not necessarily appropriate for the people you're trying to reach, or for people in general, for that matter. My favorite example of this is quite an old one, but years ago, a company made a combination MP3 player and taser. Yes, the weapon. And, gets better, it came in fashion colors. You had pink, red, black, and leopard print. This didn't sell very well. I want one, but then again, I'm a bit weird. My point is that if you just look at the tech and say, oh, we could put these things together and make it in a pretty case, it's not necessarily going to win you any kind of battles. So if you're not going to follow the competition or the general minefield of the business world, and you're not going to follow the tech, and that really only leaves you one option, and it's the right one, which is people. The reality is that people are the heart of every system. It's people who will get money out of their pockets to pay for a product or not. It's people who will use your service or not. It's people who will respond to advertising or not. It's people who make your organizations run or not. It's people who will love you or hate you. And so unless you can give a concrete reason for whatever it is that you're doing or making that is anchored in real, honest-to-God, normal human beings, not talking about the people in this room and what we might like to see, because let's face it, we are not normal humans. Unless your idea is anchored there, you've got a problem, or you will do at some point down the line. The thing about people is that we're chaotic and unpredictable. So it's not really enough to just watch what people are doing. You need to understand why people are doing what they're doing. What is interesting? Why tells you what to do about it. So, for example, let's say your company makes these glasses. Now, based on my experience with clients, if that glass costs 10p more to make this year than it did last year, I can ask anybody at the top level exec, and they can tell me exactly why, in enormous and mind-numbing detail, why it is that that thing costs 10p more to them than it did last year. But if I ask them why they sold 20 million less, or why a whole different group of people are buying them this year than last year, they don't know. And if I ask them, well, what are you going to do about it? The answer is usually, more marketing. No. Well, maybe. Maybe that is the answer. But unless you know why, you can't know what to do about it. So why might people not be buying that glass? Maybe there's a cheaper glass. Maybe people have been breaking too many of them and cutting themselves. Maybe people don't use glasses anymore. Maybe there's now inhalable water or something. Unless you know why people are doing stuff, you don't know how to respond. You don't know how to improve. You don't know what to change, what to keep, what to throw away. So why is absolutely more important than what. And people will genuinely pay good money for things that make them happy. So that brings me to the next question. How do you know why people do what they do? Because people are, again, mysterious and chaotic. Well, you could ask them. Sometimes that works. If you spot somebody, say in a grocery store, who's been staring at the same shelf of tin goods for the last 20 minutes, you might walk up to them and ask them, why are you staring at those tin goods? They might tell you they can't find the brand they're looking for, they don't speak the language, the photos are weird, or they might just be daydreaming and hungover. You don't know. my point is that sometimes you can ask, and you'll get a good answer. You'll get an answer that's insightful, that helps you to do better. But if what you're doing, what you want to know about, is something totally new, something people have never seen before, asking them might not be the best way to understand. So, personal example, way, way back in the dim and misty, when the first iPod was about to come out, I remember reading about this and thinking, okay, so it's a little thing, size of a card packet, holds music. What do I need this for? I've got a portable CD player, I've got a portable mini disc player, I've got all kinds of different ways of listening to music, I've got all this hard media, I've got my little kit that I shove into my bag whenever I go traveling. Why do I need one of these? About 2 months after it came out, I realized that there was no way I could go another day in my life without owning one. And to this day, I use almost exclusively my iPhone or my Android device to listen to music, including when I'm at home. I just feed it through my hi-fi. This is a good example of someone like me who was even then a confirmed geek, because I'd never imagined a unified way of listening to music before, because I'd never thought about digitizing my entire collection and running entirely on digital. If you'd asked me, do you want this product? I would have said, nah, not really interested. And I imagine quite a lot of other people would have had the same response. It's been one of the greatest selling products of all time. It was one of the real breakthrough products that changed the way that people deal with digital technology. So, sometimes asking isn't good enough. Sometimes asking just isn't the right thing to do. Sometimes you can hand something to people to play with and watch them and get them to tell you what they think, what they're thinking while they use it, what they expect, what they're getting, what they're not getting. Again, sometimes that works, but if you hand people something that's completely different to anything they've ever touched, it's going to take them some time to work out what they want to do with it. And you're going to be missing a trick if you limit yourself to the first round of responses. Because, right, a friend of mine who works for the BBC, he works in R&D, and he just, can't tell you what the product is, but he put this new makeshift product. It's not in its final form by any stretch of the imagination, but he put it in people's homes and let them play with it for a week. In the first couple of days, they did really predictable stuff, more or less what he expected them to do, yeah? By the end of the week, they were doing completely crazy shit that he would never have expected, and the team got enormous quantities of really good input and feedback, and they wound up reshaping some parts of the service based on what people were doing, based on people playing with it. But it took them a while to get comfortable enough to start playing. It took them a while to get comfortable enough to start really engaging with it and working out what they wanted to do. And by this, I don't mean that you should completely overhaul any product based on whatever people do with it, because I do have seen loads of pictures of people using USB thumb drives to open beer bottles, and let's face it, it's kind of a pricey bottle opener. But the point is that people are endlessly inventive, and if you watch them, you sometimes get really good ideas of what to do next. But speaking of watching them, I think the best way to get ideas for apps, for products, for services, is to put down the mobile, put down the iPad, put down the laptop, and just watch people. Just watch people going about their daily lives. I guarantee if the next time you guys are in an airport or in a cafe waiting for a friend, really anywhere, if you don't look at a screen and look at the people around you, in a half an hour you will have 3 good ideas of some small way that you could improve whatever it is they're doing. Maybe they're struggling with the parking meter. Maybe they can't find a product. Maybe they're wandering around the airport wondering where they are. These little moments are opportunities to make a really big difference for people. And again, people will pay for what makes them happy. People will love you for making their lives the tiniest bit better. Example, airport, me. I travel a lot. I live here and also part-time in London. It is a frequent occurrence that I will get up at stupid o'clock in the morning, I get in a taxi, I go to Tegel, I rush through security, and I've got about 20 minutes before I have to get on the plane. I have been known to go and stand somewhere in duty-free and stare blankly at a shelf and almost miss my flight because nobody told me it was time to board. If my phone could vibrate when it was time to board, maybe I wouldn't wind up running for the plane looking like an idiot. Maybe not, we don't know. But these little moments are things that would make a massive difference to me and that I would be quite grateful for. So don't underestimate the power of small things to make a difference. And don't underestimate your own powers of observation. It's not just about what you want, it's about what you observe people, real people in the real world doing. That's what will show you the right direction to go in. And if you anchor your observation there, then all of a sudden, the new tech that's come along, a use for it will present itself. Or there will be some way for you to do something that the competition has never even thought of before. And that vastly improves the service that you're building. These are the moments that really make a difference. Oh yeah, importantly. So once you understand why, as well as what, and you build your product, and you build your app, and you launch it, it's also important to follow up on that stuff. So ideally, you shouldn't just be looking at how many downloads you've got, or how many paid customers you have over how many free customers you have. Try to understand what the indicators are for why people are or are not doing what you think they're going to do. So let's say you have a search product, and people aren't clicking through from the search results. Why is that? Well, it could be because the results aren't good enough, which you would be able to tell if you followed how many query strings people entered for a given search. That would give you some sort of indication. It's not a guarantee, but it's an indication. What I'm getting at is that by finding indicators that show you the mentality behind people's behavior, you'll have a much better framework for taking action. Instead of just measuring one thing, measure 3 or 4 things, and that will help you along your way. It'll help you draw better conclusions. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about why this is important. So, 10 years ago, digital was optional for most of the people on the planet. Most people did all of their banking in person, in branches, for example, and those of us who were really comfortable with technology did our banking online. Now, lots of banks don't have branches. Those that do quite often only have a bunch of ATMs and some guy that will help you use the ATM if you're lost and really nobody else to talk to. Utility bills, if you want them in paper, if you don't want to manage your accounts online, you have to pay extra for that now. My point is that everybody now, everyone, my 73-year-old mother, the 14-year-old in school, all of us in this room and everyone we know, has to engage with the digital world to some degree. So it's important that those experiences be reasonable, be good, be positive. How miserable do we want everyone to be on an ongoing basis? How much frustration can we handle? And it's not just about the people on that end, it's also about businesses. So even 5 or 6 years ago, well, God, I mean, even today, to some degree, lots of businesses have, this little digital team over here in the corner who are meant to be doing all the digital products, when actually all of their products and services are in some way manifest in the digital world. I see lots of nodding going on out there. We all know this is true, right? There's just some little team with some little guy who's trying desperately to do the right thing. We can help them. It's our job. We know how to do this. We should be taking some responsibility for this, because businesses, a bank, it's not their core business to know how to make great experiences for people in the digital world. It's their core business to know how to manage money and keep it secure and safe so that it doesn't disappear when we need it. Businesses don't always understand the impact that their technology and that their services have on the people on the other end. And so it's to a great extent down to us to help them see that, to help make sure that they're doing the right thing, that we're doing the right thing. And at the same time, there's the flip side, which is that, okay, again, going back a bit, so in the days before the first Apple App Store, if you had a higher-end mobile device, what you could do with it was predicated on who made it and who your service provider was. So if you had a Nokia phone on Orange, and they happened to give you MMS and email and, I don't know, some kind of real-time picture sharing service, then that was what you got. And no matter how rubbish that experience was, that was what you got, and you had to deal with it. Finished, done. Now, anyone with an iPhone, with an Android device, with a Windows phone, they can choose from hundreds of I don't know, alarm clocks or photo sharing apps or ways of posting things to Twitter. And what that means is that it's no longer good enough to make something that completes a task. It's got to actually be good. It's got to be appealing, because otherwise people won't use it. They'll go and use something else. Normal people have more control, more choice than they ever have before. More control and more choice than most businesses are ready to even concede that they have. So it's important that we do it right for our clients, for our businesses, for the people at the other end. And finally, and a little bit more philosophically, the other reason why it's important is because we, myself and everybody in this room and most of the people that we work with, we are actually making the future. A little bit every day. I know that sounds really grandiose, but it's true. The small things that we make, the medium-sized things that we make, the big things that we make, are actually shaping the next generation of stuff that's going to come after. And if you look around at the way businesses are talking about big data, for instance, or the way Facebook and Instagram talk about the rights to the photos that you post, it's kind of alarming. There's not a lot in there that doesn't indicate some sort of dystopian future. Minority Report and the latest Microsoft Vision movie have a lot in common, and it's not a good thing. Think about it this way. Picture yourself in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. Where do you want to be? What do you want the view out your window to be? Who's sitting next to you? What are you going to do today? Well, one answer, and an answer that quite a lot of what's happening now is leading us toward, is that you don't have a window, you have a screen. And yeah, you can decide what landscape you see, but unless you pay an extra chunk of change, it's going to be branded, lots of logos everywhere. Yeah, it's not pleasant, is it? The person sitting next to you might not actually be a person. It's a hologram of somebody who lives halfway around the world, or perhaps even more terrifyingly, a hologram of your first ever love that you loved and lost, and you can't bear to cope with real humans anymore, so you've got this hologram next to you now. This doesn't sound good, right? Okay. And finally, what are you going to do today? Right? So I want to choose what I do today, tomorrow, every day. I want that to be up to me. Yeah, I'm open to suggestion. I'm open to hearing what other people are doing. I'm open to seeing what's available to me. But I don't want people to make my decisions for me. And the more we talk about blah, blah, everything relevance-based, blah, blah, everything contextual, the smaller our worlds get, the less unexpectedly pleasant and surprising things we come across. And so I try to think about this stuff when I consult. I try to think about this stuff when I'm designing stuff. I try to think about this all the way through the process. Why am I making the things that I'm making? Why am I telling my clients the things that I'm telling them? Why do I believe in the things that I believe in? And it all kind of comes back to that point, is whatever I make today, not only does somebody have to put up with it, use it, or has the option to or not, but it's a little piece of the foundation of what's going to happen next. And so if we are all making the future, I would suggest that it's up to us to make sure that it's a future that we want. I'm going to stop talking now and let you guys ask me questions. Thanks. Does anyone want to ask me anything? There's a mic at the back.
So finding about what's wrong about your product when you ask customers. From your experience, is it true that you don't have to ask, let's say, 100 customers, but that 6 to 10 is sufficient, or do you really need much big data for it? I heard from UX design, so if you just use 5 people, you get nearly all faults that you have in your UI or something.
It kind of depends on which 5 people, doesn't it? I wish I could tell you there's some kind of answer to that question. There isn't a single answer to that question. It's an unfortunate truth about design that there's no sort of single process. If you do steps A through Z, you will be A-okay, everything will work out fine. Your approach has to be tailored to whatever it is that you're trying to do. So if you're, for instance, making an app or a service for teenagers, then you can probably get away with half a dozen, because you can cover quite a lot of different kinds of teenagers in half a dozen. If, on the other hand, you're making, I don't know, a banking app that's meant to appeal to everybody ages 14 to dead, or just before dead, then you probably need to go through a slightly broader cross-section of people to get the kinds of answers that you want. I think it's not just about who you're asking, but what you're asking them, and how much is verbal and how much is observed. Because there's also a difference between what we're able to express in terms of what we do and don't do and why and what we like, and the reality. People don't always even, I don't often know why I made certain decisions. It might be just because of the way it felt, or it might be I was having a bad day. So it's important to contextualize both the questions and the responses you get. Does that help? Anyone else?
I don't know if it's also kind of maybe not a question that can be answered, but I have a lot of trouble when I have people test something. You put them in a critic mode already, and it's really hard to observe certain behaviors. I don't know if there's a think tank or test groups or focus groups, what works best to try to get people more into a user point of view and not in a critical point of view.
There's lots that impacts that. So that's partly about, again, who you're asking and how you put them together and what it is that you're asking them to do. It's also about the environment and the way that you frame the task. So one of the things that I've done is instead of asking people questions, give them something to use and watch them use it and ask them to think aloud. So if you give them a task that's actually something that the app or the service or whatever is meant to do, make a transfer. And you watch them doing it, and then you sort of ask them ancillary questions. If they're doing something weird, you ask them, why are you doing that, or how does that feel? You'll get a much more contextually relevant response from them, if you like, rather than just sitting them in a room and saying, do you hate it or not? And it can also be really useful to hear people discuss amongst themselves, but then it's a matter of getting the proper group of people together and making sure that what you want to do is set up the kinds of responses, I don't mean yes or no, like or hate, but the kind of environment that's conducive to the kind of response that you want to get. If you want people to give you new ideas, then you want to make them comfortable, you want to give them interesting input. If, on the other hand, you've built a process and you want to see whether or not it works for people, the absolute best way to know is to have them give it a go and watch where they succeed and where they fail and ask them why. Anyone else? Okay.